Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck, and if you can't tell, I got bangs. It's very exciting. I'm still I just did this, so I'm still trying to figure out how to style them and if I like them and stuff like that. But you know, it was a bold move, I think. I haven't had bangs since I was 4, so you know, it was a big change. So today I wanted to tell you about my TBR for a reading challenge that I am doing. In my resolutions for 2018 video, I mentioned that I'm doing a reading challenge with a friend of mine, and part of that reading challenge is that we pick a genre and then we read a book published in each decade from the 50s to the 2000s in that genre, so we can kind of see how that genre has changed throughout the decades. And for me, I picked science fiction as my genre. I'm gonna kind of focus more on dystopian science fiction, but I wanted to leave it a little bit more open. I'm trying to read books specifically that were very influential to the genre. But a lot of those books I've already read. I've already read Fahrenheit 451 and 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale and, you know, a lot of things like that. So some of those won't be included, but I was trying to find new books from this genre of science fiction and dystopian that I could read throughout the decades. So I only have 2 of these books so far in physical copies because I already owned them, which is also part of how they made it on the list. For the ones that I don't have physical copies, I will try to put pictures up on the screen somewhere and find out if I can figure out how to do that. So if I do, that'll happen. Starting with the 50s, my first book is The Day of the Trifids by John Wyndham? I don't know how you say his last name. I have had this book for a while. I was talking to a coworker about that I read science fiction, and she had this book and she loved it and she gave it to me. I'd never heard of it before, and I just kind of never got around to reading it. What I know of the story is that it follows a man who I think has recently had an eye surgery or something, and so he has kind of been blinded for a while, and he's recently coming out of the hospital, and as he is kind of re-entering the world, suddenly these plant aliens called Trifids attack the world and start to take over everything. And that's pretty much all I know about it, is just that it's about killer plants taking over the world. So we'll see how it goes. It's a really short book, so I mean, I guess it'll go pretty fast, I think. And the person who gave this to me really loved it, and she doesn't even read sci-fi, but she thought this was great, so hopefully it's good. The next book on my list for the 60s is Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein, and this one I don't have a physical copy, so hopefully I can put a picture on the screen. Did it happen? Does it look cool? Do I look like I know what I'm doing? Is there a picture? Hopefully there is. Okay, in Stranger in a Strange Land, we follow a man who has been raised on Mars and then has come back to Earth. And once he is on Earth, he has to relearn, or learn for the first time, how to live among humans, how to live among Earth people, and understand the culture and dynamics and prejudices and things like that that exist on Earth. And I think this sounds like a really interesting story. This is one that has been on my list of science fiction books to read for a long time, and I've never gotten around to it. Next up for the 70s book is Kindred by Octavia Butler. So I have read one other book by Octavia Butler, which was Wild Seed, which is not one of her more popular books, and it was really intense, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. But Kindred is one of her most popular books. It was very influential to science fiction, and it follows a woman in the 70s in California, I think, who is a black woman, and she's suddenly transported through time into the past in Maryland, where she saves a white boy's life when he is about to drown. Then she is again time traveled back to her present time, and throughout throughout the book, she keeps being kind of wrenched back and forth through time to these two different time periods, and she keeps interacting with this one man or boy that like she follows throughout his life and keeps saving him, and then finds out that he is actually her, I think, great-grandfather, and so she is being time traveled back and forth in order to save him so that she can exist now, or in the 70s. That also sounds like it's going to be a very intense book, but I have heard really great things about it. That's another one that a coworker of mine really, really loves. I'm really interested to see what it's like, especially because this is one of her most popular and most well-known books, and I've only read one of the less popular books by Octavia Butler. Next up, I do have a physical copy of this for the 80s, which is Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. Now, before I talk about this book, I do kind of want to do a little like disclaimer about Orson Scott Card, because so this is the second book in the series. I read his first book, Ender's Game, and I really enjoyed it. But then after doing some research about him, I found out that Orson Scott Card is actually very like homophobic and misogynist person, and so I don't want to like support him, but I do want to continue reading these books because these have been very influential books culturally and to the genre of science fiction, and they are very good. The compromise that I have come to for myself that I am comfortable with is that I will be buying all of his books used, so that the proceeds from me buying these books will not go back to him. They will go to the used bookstore that I am buying them from, which I am totally cool with supporting a used bookstore. Actually, another booktuber that I follow, which is Jess Reads Books, just recently read Ender's Game, which is the first book in this series, and she also talked about this topic of, you know, reading books by authors that you don't like them as a person, but you like their work. So I'll link her video down below. So on to the description of this book. As I said, this is the second book in the series. The first book is called Ender's Game. It is in a futuristic world where the Earth is being attacked by aliens, these bug-like aliens, and the government has started this program where they're essentially creating child soldiers. The first book starts where Ender, I think, is like 6 or something, and they take him away to this academy to become like a great general and leader and among all of these other child soldiers. And there's a lot of like manipulation, and it's super, like, a lot of terrible stuff happens. And I don't necessarily want to like go too much into what this book is specifically about because it is the second one. My impression is that he's kind of trying to repent for the things that he was forced to do in the first book. I also have heard that in the second book and as the series continues, it gets much more dense and more philosophical. So I'm interested to see like how I feel about that. Really, the reason for me that I read science fiction is because it brings up a lot of philosophical questions, more so than some other genres do. So I think I'm gonna like it, but I'm interested to see how it goes. And the next book that I have for the 90s is The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. This book is about humanity making contact with alien life. They hear singing, I believe, coming from space and are able to identify where it is coming from, and so find alien life. And then while the governments are trying to figure out what to do about this, a group of Jesuits send a team of people to go find this alien life. And it seems like it's going to be an interesting story. It said that it deals a lot with religion and with what it means to be human, and both of those sound like interesting topics, and those are both things that like I think are really interesting. So I am feeling pretty optimistic about this one. I hope it goes well. And the last book on this list for the 2000s is Crick and Oryx by Margaret Atwood, who is the author that wrote The Handmaid's Tale, actually. And Crick and Oryx, I was reading descriptions of this book and I was super confused what it's about. It's been on my TBR for science fiction for a long time because it is a it's a post-apocalyptic dystopian story. And I'm not a huge fan of post-apocalyptic, but I am a fan of dystopian. So it's been on this list because it's one that's usually recommended for people who like dystopian books. And it is, again, one that's been influential to the genre. I'm just super unsure what this is about. So I don't know, but I'm planning to read it and hopefully I can report back and like explain it better after I've read the book. So that is all for my reading challenge TBR. Let me know in the comments down below what science fiction books you really love or you would recommend or you've read recently. I want to read more science fiction. I've been on a real like fantasy binge and I do like science fiction. I just don't read it as much. So I'd love to talk to you guys about sci-fi in the comments, and thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!